Hello, everyone. My name is Godstime David, and today I have the pleasure of sitting down with someone whose story you'd like to hear. Joining me is Alex, who will be sharing his story of transition. Now, without giving too much away, I'll let Alex introduce himself and take us through his transition process. Alex, over to you.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm a bisexual trans guy. My pronouns are he and they, and I'm here to talk a little bit about my story.
So, could you please walk me through your early experiences into gender identity? Like, when did you first realize that who you were is not who you wanted to be? When gender identity conversation pops up, especially in a family setting, how did your family take the news?
Basically, my whole life, I knew that my mum's side of the family were really conservative. They basically were really bigoted, didn't really like anyone that wasn't like themselves, which was a nightmare, They started doing documentaries and stuff on TV at one point about trans people, and my granddad, who said that he didn't believe in religion or anything like that, said it was like an affront to God and creation, which is really weird if you don't believe in that, apparently. Then my other side of the family was generally really, really religious. I was brought up a lot by that side of the family, my dad's side, and they were this big Catholic family. And the thing about religion is that loads of people use it as an excuse for hate, when all that the Bible preaches is to love one another and to respect people and stuff like that. But a lot of people there just couldn't accept us for who I was because of stuff like that, and it just, I don't know, it wasn't a good time. But the one person who did on that side was my grandma, and she's been incredible through all of it. She's the one who supported us. She's the one who helped me make my appointments in the beginning, and it was my grandparents who took me down for my surgery revision and stuff like that. So yeah, they're pretty amazing.
Now, your grandma already did support you. How did you prep yourself to go through this process? Because you probably would need to do some form of self preparations. How did you prep yourself to go through this?
At first, I thought I was strictly sort of masculine, and I had to be really, really masculine according to what society said. But then over time, I learned that it's not really about just how other people perceive me, it's about me being me as well. So during lockdown, I realized that I'm not entirely binary male, but I'm okay with that. I don't have to be the most masculine man in existence. You know what I mean? There's loads of different scenarios and cultures where a man would wear a dress, for example, even up in Scotland, you know what I mean? So if they can do that, why can't I? Because there's a lot of these double standards where a guy will wear a dress like Harry Styles or something like that, and people will cheer him on. But when a trans guy does it, we're not manly enough. And yeah, I don't really stand for any of that stuff. I just do my own thing now.
Was there any form of bullying at all at any point?
Give or take, yes, but it was usually microaggressions, if that makes sense. People being oh, I don't get this stuff, and I say, oh, what's the world coming to? That sort of thing. That's that doesn't matter what you think. People like me exist, and we're going to continue existing, and you can't do anything about it. A lot of people at first really didn't understand it. My mum initially tried to kind of victimize herself, saying oh, I'm losing this, I'm losing that. It's I'm still here. I'm just here as me now and more comfortable. You might not have a daughter, but you've always had a son, really, from my point of view. Stuff like that. So it was less bullying, I guess, and more just people not being understanding at all. When it came to school, I only really came out as trans in my last year of school, so when I was 16, because I said, for a while I was I can't tell anyone about this. And people were a bit nasty, but at that point I didn't really care, because I knew I was going to be leaving that school in the next few months, so I was just yes.
What were the factors that led up to your decision to transition?
I had a lot of mental health issues to start with when I was that age, to do with a lot of things that were going on at home and the way people were in general. Some of the weird things that family members were saying. One of the things I remember is that when I was by, my granddad said, the one that I was talking about being bigoted, he said that men being attracted to men was disgusting, but when women are attracted to women, it's okay because men like it, which was really gross. But yeah, that was, where was I with that? Oh yeah, and then how I eventually took the decision to transition. Because as soon as I figured out sort of what I was and realized there was a whole community of people just like me, I did like research into what people tend to do, and I learned about things like binding and stuff like that. So I started doing that, which for those that don't know is just like a way to flatten the chest. There's safe ways to do it and there's unsafe ways to do it. And I didn't have access to the safe stuff then because I was scared. But eventually, once I came out, my grandma knew, I think, that it was the right thing for my mental health because I had these problems with like suicidal ideation and self-harm and stuff like that. So she made me an appointment. I couldn't see a proper gender clinic then because I was too young. You can only see like gender clinics once you're like 17 here. And you can only get like medication once you're that age as well. When it comes to trying to get on those waiting lists, it can be an absolute nightmare. So my grandma helped us out. She got me on a waiting list for mental health help. My parents ignored any calls that they gave me. And eventually, she was like, yeah, no, this isn't it. I'm taking you back to the doctors so we can get you an actual, like, proper diagnosis and get you on an actual waiting list. So my grandma took me back. And by then, I was old enough to be put on the actual waiting list for the gender clinic. And even though it was years of waiting, I was still like ecstatic. I didn't get any hormones or anything until I was almost 20, but I mean, it was worth it. The waiting lists now are much, much worse. Though I only had to wait like 2-3 years.
How did you prepare yourself up onto that point?
It's a whole load of things. Basically, a first appointment, which was 2 years after my initial referral. That was, I think it's a psychological assessment. And then after that, they do another one and then they prescribe you. But a lot of the time when it comes to transitioning, they want proof that you've lived as the person that you want to be for a few years. So I had started like obviously binding, going by my new pronouns, going by a new name because that was what I wanted. And I was lucky that by the time I got around to getting medication and stuff like that, it was a case of I had already been living like that for a while anyway. It's just about, I think, mainly adapting to changes and learning how to do things safely as well, because by then I had a part-time job and I could buy things that were safer, like a proper binder rather than just like bandages or something that were hurting my ribs.
Having eventually decided what you wanted to do and having the support you had, what was the surgical process like?
So with surgery, it was kind of like I knew I wanted it from the beginning, but you can't be referred for surgery until you've started hormones. So I was referred for surgery around like 18, 19. And I was supposed to initially get it when I was around 21. And then COVID happened and it was cancelled. And it was really annoying because even though I really wanted it, it was also very, very scary. And I'd been for this like consultation where people had touched me, and it was like the top surgery, which is like the breast removal. And people had touched me in that area and I didn't really like it, but I thought it was worth it. And then that surgery itself got cancelled. So all of that working up that I'd done to like getting ready for it and preparing emotionally for it went out the window. And then it got rescheduled. And then that reschedule got cancelled again. And then eventually I got a new date, went up to, well, I was going down to Hull for all this stuff as well. So it was all travel. It was all expensive. Went down to Hull. Got to the point where I'd even had the pre-op, had the bloods taken, had the swabs, had my BMI checked, all of this stuff. And they cancelled it like 5 days before the surgery. Eventually, it got sorted out. And I ended up getting my surgery, when was it? Like my main surgery was 2022, I think now. And it was really weird because I remember it was just before graduation. And I was like at graduation with like my bandages on and stuff like that. But, you know, it's like, when else am I going to get a chance to do that sort of stuff? You know, I went to a fairground and went on the big wheel when I had my bandages on and my drains in. It's, you know, I was so happy when I saw myself, but it was also kind of scary because I got a bit of an infection and I ended up losing It's weird because when they do the top surgery, they kind of remove your nipples and put them back on and reshape them. And on one side, I just kind of have a flat nipple now because I lost the actual nipple part because it got infected, and that was a bit scary. And I think it's because of things like that that I might not necessarily pursue bottom surgery, because that's like 4 different surgeries, and if something goes wrong or if something gets infected, that's it. It's not like it is up here where it's a visual thing. It's like your body's not going to work the same ever again. And for me, I don't think that would be worth it. Like, the risk is too high for me, both mentally and physically. But after my top surgery, once it had healed, there was a lot of fat left at the sides, which is something that can happen. So back in March, I went for a revision. Those would be the recent photos that you saw, where they went back in. I got put under general anesthetic again, and they took out the fat that was at the sides, and I look much better now, and I'm much happier with the way I look. It's very, like, I've been out in public topless now and stuff like that, and it's like, looking back at myself, when I first realised I was trans, I never dreamed that I'd be able to, like, feel the sun on my chest and stuff like that, and that felt absolutely magical. I did that at Sunderland Pride, and I was like, this is incredible. Never thought I'd be able to do this in my life, but here I am.
Now we have family. We've talked about family and the role family played. What role did your friends play? What form of support did you have from friends?
Quite interestingly, I would say I had some friends along the earlier side that were like school friends, and we all know school kids aren't always the best. And some of them were really understanding. Others pretended to be understanding until they got to a point where they were like, "Oh, you're taking this being a boy thing too seriously." And I'm like, "But I am a boy, to me at least." But eventually, once I went to college, that entirely changed. The college systems were able to put me down with my like name and pronouns that I wanted and stuff. And I made friends there that I'm still friends with, and I see. We always meet up like for Weatherspoons every few months, and we're all so busy, but we always manage to somehow make time for it. So the friendships I had from there lasted, and some of the most amazing people I ever met that really improved my life. Relationship-wise, I've been in like 2 proper relationships, and they were both with other trans people. Because the thing about being trans is that if you get with someone who isn't trans, you have to explain it all to them. You have to try and get them to understand everything, both in day-to-day terms and with stuff in the bedroom, because that can get really confusing for people who don't understand it. But if you date someone who's already trans, then they already get all of that. They get all of the hoops you have to jump through to get where you are. They understand how it's like to be perceived like that by society. So you don't have to like educate them or anything like that, which can be a nightmare. And both of my previous partners were both trans guys, but I might have a trans femme partner in the future as well. Being bisexual doesn't make much of a difference to me.
Now, how has this impacted your relationship with your friends? How did this play out in the long run?
A lot of trans people were seen as like freak shows, kinda. And a lot of the time as well, when it wasn't that, it was always, oh, these are gross sexual deviants, they're this, that, the other. And that made me feel like I was a gross person. So I didn't want to tell people because I thought I was just one of those like gross insert slur for trans people, you know? So that initially scared us. I didn't want people to think that I was this gross person when I'm just someone trying to live as me. Over time, it's really weird because I feel like we made a load of progress in the years following that. So the years where I was in like my late teens, things started to get way, way better. And then I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was over lockdown or whatever, but there was this like resurgence in like anti-trans stuff. There was this rise of like TERF and stuff like that. For people that don't know what TERF is, it's trans exclusionary radical feminist. And I feel like bit by bit we're regressing, and people are getting less and less rights in general, and then trans people are being used as like a scapegoat for a lot of different things. I felt that a lot during the like election and stuff. It was all, you know, seeing how anti-trans they could be and seeing if they could stop things. And it's like they were using research that wasn't tested properly. And that's like, this is life-saving stuff. You can't take this away from people. And since they've stopped giving puberty blockers to people, the amount of like suicides caused by stuff like that has went up massively. We went up from, I think it was 0 or 1 suicide from not being able to access medication to over 14 in the space of like 2 years. And it's just getting worse at this point. There's always something happening, and it's really, really sad to see people in like community targeted. And it makes me scared to go outside as well, especially when it's like all of these like riots that have been happening recently, because I think we all know that when someone's a bigot, they're a bigot. If they don't like this group of people, then they probably also don't like anyone else who's different than them either. So it's kind of terrifying, but I really hope things start to improve soon.
Thank you for watching and listening to Alex's story. Everyone's journey is unique, and we hope that this conversation offered insight into one person's experience. Feel free to share your thoughts in a moment and join us next time for more personal stories and perspectives.